Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Podcast. I'm Graham Richmond, and this is your wiretaps for Monday, August 31st, 2020. Alex Brown joins me as always. Alex, how are things in England?
Very good, thank you, Graham, despite the wet weather.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, it's been hot in France. I'm back in France. And, obviously, I don't know what you guys are experiencing in the UK, but the numbers are creeping up at a rapid pace in France with respect to the coronavirus. So it's kind of a strange, return from summer, but we'll see how things continue to evolve. And hopefully there won't be another lockdown or something. People can kind of continue to go about their business, but, with some social distancing and stuff, we'll see how it evolves.
I think we're on the knife edge right now. This whole idea of the students or kids have got to go back to school. That's very important.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth, like balancing against obviously the increases in number of cases. So yeah, it's still very unsettling times, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't envy the people who have to make these decisions, even at the business schools. We've heard a lot of news of late of, how schools are handling the return or not return to campus, and, a lot of virtual orientations and stuff. But yeah, it's tricky. So hopefully better times are ahead. In terms of updates, I wanted to mention that tomorrow, Tuesday, we have September 1st, that is, at noon Eastern, we have the final class in our MBA Admissions Academy that you and I have been leading all summer long. We've had a great group of students in that class, and this final lesson is about interviews, which I realize might be premature for some candidates because not everyone will have applied yet and gotten interview invitations, but there are a handful of schools where you sign up yourself for an interview. And you and I have talked about this. We're gonna really try to provide a lot of insights into how to do these things virtually because, as you and I both know, I don't think any school is doing in-person interviews, at least not out of the gate here in the fall. So that'll be a fun lesson. I encourage everyone to join us for that. Alex, you've been busily working to prepare for that, right?
Yeah. No, the deck is in draft mode.
All right. The other thing I wanted to call people's attention to is that every week we keep rolling out these admissions director Q&As, and we had a really good experience chatting and connecting with Kirsten Moss over at Stanford. That's up on the site. Continue to read those. If you're applying to these schools, you might as well hear from the horse's mouth what the admissions directors have to say about their process and their essays and things like that. The other thing we did is we ran a story about Wharton and the fact that Wharton had to kind of walk back a bit their decision to do a hybrid experience for the students who are starting this fall. So it's been pushed back to being more online. And there was some controversy around that. And we published a piece that I thought did a really nice kind of balanced job of talking about how that all unfolded and connected with students and staff. And so definitely check that out if you're interested in how Wharton's been managing this. And then the last thing, Alex, is we're doing on Wednesday of this week, September 2nd, also at noon Eastern, we're doing our first application insights workshop. And this one's all about essays. And basically, we've invited admissions folks from Columbia, Duke, Wharton, and Yale to join us in a kind of roundtable discussion. I'm going to be emceeing it and basically peppering these folks with questions about their essay topics and what they look for. And this won't be the usual kind of song and dance that you might get from an info session where a school just talks about their program. This is really going to be pinpoint, why do you ask this essay question? What are you looking for? And I've got a whole bunch of, very specific questions prepared. So I'm really looking forward to that and encourage people to sign up. You can actually just go to bit.ly/essay insight if you want to sign up for that. And the other big news, we're doing another Essay Insights workshop on September 16th. And that one's going to have MIT Sloan, NYU Stern, and Chicago Booth. So these are new for us. I'm really excited. I think it's going to be fun to talk with these schools. So I'm looking forward to that. And we'll see how they go.
I'm absolutely certain they're going to be fantastic. I think the concept is brilliant, quite frankly.
Cool. No pressure.
Yeah.
All right. So the last thing I wanted to say before we dive into the, ApplyWire candidates we're going to review this week is that we still would love to get some ratings and reviews for the podcast. So to the extent that you're a regular listener and can just take a few minutes over in the Apple Podcast area or even on Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast, if you can rate this, it really helps us, and it helps other people to discover what we're doing. So appreciate it. Thanks in advance. Alex, let's move on. You picked out 3 wiretaps candidates, and they're all apply wire entries, and I'm actually particularly excited about them this week because you've got a few that I think are going to allow us to discuss some interesting aspects to applying to business school and decisions that people need to make. So let's dive in, unless you had anything else you wanted to share this week.
No, let's kick on. Yeah.
All right. So this is wiretaps candidate number 1. So this person's targeting 6 MBA programs. They want to start in the fall of 2021, and they're applying to Georgetown, LBS, Michigan, Kellogg, UNC, and Vanderbilt. And before business school, they've been, kind of working in consulting and financial services. After business school, they're hoping to get into consulting, and the companies that they're interested in are Accenture, A.T. Kearney, Bain, BCG, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, McKinsey, PwC, basically the whole gamut of all the top kind of consulting firms that are out there. The GMAT score that this person has achieved is a 680. They have a 3.3 GPA, 6 years of work experience. They're located in Chicago, but after business school are interested in maybe landing in London or Chicago or New York. And the interesting thing is, in the note, this person indicated that they're a white male living in Chicago, working for a small consulting firm, but prior to that had been doing some stuff with a tier 1 bank. So they have kind of a banking and consulting background. And the interesting thing is that I really wanted to share is that they would like to go to Europe and potentially stay there. And so there's been you had some discussion with them. And the other thing that really piqued my interest is that this person was team captain of their baseball team at a liberal arts college. They were the catcher on the baseball team, and they had 135 career starts, and were actually on their way to being a mid to late round draft pick in the 2014 Major League Baseball draft, but then had an injury, which basically was career ending. So really interesting background. I don't know what you had some back and forth, but what do you make of this candidate and their numbers and kind of the school selection, all of it?
Well, the guy's a Chelsea fan, so that was a massive strike against him from the get-go. But other than that, I mean, I say that jokingly as a big Man City fan. Other than that, some interesting stuff here, Graham. I think certainly the baseball stuff, I mean, obviously that's a passion of yours. Yeah. Rather than a passion of mine, I think it's interesting, right? Any time you've got a star athlete, they clearly they've put a lot of time, effort, and energy, and a lot of passion and commitment into their athletic career simultaneously to their school career. Mm-hmm. And they were, they were on a pathway to go into professional sports, which is I think is absolutely I think that's a terrific opportunity that very, very few have available to them. And then obviously the injury changed this person's trajectory. And it seems like they've managed to, I guess, use the term pivot quite well in terms of, going into their professional career, as you said, bit of banking, bit of consulting, and so on and so forth. So they've probably managed that. I mean, it's got to be devastating for a college athlete to get essentially a career-ending injury that they have to then shift gears and so on and so forth. So how they manage that, maybe there's a story there that works into their applications too in terms of perseverance and so on and so forth. I think there's a lot to like there. Ultimately they had a 3.3 GPA. They, as an athlete, they were struggling a little bit with their GPA, managing their time. So obviously there's some upward trajectory. After that, their 680 on the GMAT is okay, but they plan to retake the GMAT. And they're also doing MBA maths. So they're doing a lot of the right things to position themselves, I think, for getting into programs, at least the sort of programs they've listed here. Frankly, I don't think they've been overly ambitious in their target selection, but they actually do have a nice spread, right? So they've got a couple of M7s, or M7 equivalent of LBS, Kellogg, But, then, one or two top 16, one or two top 20, and so on and so forth. So that's quite good strategically. What's super interesting is this person wants to be in Europe post-MBA, and if they get the opportunity, they never want to come back to America. So I don't know what America's done to this person, Graham. As an American that lives in Europe, you can probably empathize with them a little bit. And maybe talk a little bit about your journey in that regard. But that is going to be challenging. So if they really do have an inclination to want to be outside of the United States, I would encourage them to look at more European-based programs. Obviously, London Business School, I have a massive fondness for. It's elite UK-based. But maybe they need to look at, obviously INSEAD, but there's several other top European-based programs they could be looking at, whether it's Oxford, Cambridge, if they want to be in the UK, it could be ESE, and so on and so forth. I'm not sure what their language skills are, and the requirements of some of these schools might require another language. But yeah, some interesting stuff here, Graham. This whole idea they want to be in Europe post-MBA or outside the United States does make for a different conversation, I think.
Yeah, I think, so first of all, if they retake the GMAT, which is their plan, and they push the score up above 700, I think the conversation shifts a little bit in that, suddenly they have a 3.3, but it's an upward trajectory, and they were very active, obviously, in sports as a team captain. So there's a good storyline there. Plus, you add in MBA math, and things start to come together. I think the work experience, which we haven't talked a ton about, though, is pretty interesting. I mean, they've been doing consulting for the last 3.5 years, but they also spent a year and a half prior to that doing banking. So they have like a good range of work experience. And I think, as you correctly point out, suffering a massive injury that kind of derails a professional sports career is both, it's kind of a learning experience. And it seems like, as you said, they were able to pivot and rebound. And so there's a lot to like about this candidate. I do have trouble with the Europe goal. I think it's, I'm just trying to figure out, like, what's the justification beyond, like wanting to live there. Like, it's not as though this person is doing a certain type of work that has been wholly involved with, solely working on like European clients, and they're saying, wow, I've got all these contacts in Europe now, and I want to do an MBA over there and stay there, So I feel like I'm a little concerned that some of the, like for example, if they're applying to Owen and UNC and Georgetown, all these other schools on their list, and saying, oh, I'm going to go to work in Europe afterwards, I don't know how palatable that's going to be for those schools. Obviously, if they're applying to LBS, which is on their list, then, that makes sense. You go to LBS, you stay in the UK. I believe you're allowed to now for, I want to say at least a year, if not 3, post-MBA to kind of work. So there's just some like loose ends that need to be kind of tied up. But I do agree, if they want to be in Europe, if that's the real goal, then they might want to reconsider the school selection somewhat, like you suggest. Now, they did note they really would like a 2-year program, and that really limits things when you start to talk about Europe. And you've got LBS. You do have some programs that are like in between. So like HEC outside of Paris is one that's in between, in that I can't remember if it's 16 months but they basically run it a little bit longer than this sort of INSEAD 10-month sprint, And I think you correctly point out, like for INSEAD, there's going to be language requirements, right? So it really depends on what schools, they're going to look at. And I would also like to know, like, where they want to land. Because if they want to land in continental Europe, then it's one discussion. If they want to land in the UK, then look at UK schools. There's Manchester, there's, as you point out, Oxford, Cambridge. I mean, there's so many options. But again, many of them are going to be 1 year. Yeah. And that sort of changes things. I will say it doesn't sound like they're doing a dramatic career shift. They want to stay in consulting. And so it's possible that they could do a 1 year and not worry about, needing the kind of internship or the traditional kind of approach. But yeah, so it's an interesting candidate. I like the candidate. I think they're going to have success. I think obviously if they boost that GMAT score, they'll be in a much better position. Last thing I'll say is I think some of the European schools would really covet getting a candidate like this. They don't get a ton of Americans, and this is an American with kind of interesting experience and leadership. And so I think this person's got a solid candidacy. I just want them to sort of figure out the the goals piece and get the school selection right, and obviously do as well as they can on that GMAT retake.
Yeah, and I think your last point is very important. US candidate applying to European schools, that can be very attractive for the the diversity within European programs, which are renowned for having folks from all around the world. And yeah, I think that's very good. Also, European programs aren't as focused necessarily on the GMAT, and I say that's a very broad brush statement. And it's all a little bit relative. But the 680 might not be such a weaker point,
right,
for them. But again, if you can push it up to 710, 720, that would be absolutely fantastic. But yeah, lots to like here.
Yeah.
As you say, the career side of it, which I didn't really go into any detail, is absolutely on par for top tier programs for people going for an MBA. So there could be I think interesting. I love the sports side of it and how this person handled the injury. And whether that becomes a story in their applications might be very interesting.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point that we should underline for all of our listeners, which is that it is true. The European MBA programs have long wanted to attract American candidates because, quite frankly, there are a lot of good MBA programs in the U.S., and so Americans are less inclined to look to go to Europe, or at least traditionally that's been the case. And there's less of a tradition of standardized testing in Europe, and so I think European admissions officers are not as focused on the test. I think it does vary. You might find it at LBS and INSEAD, they have pretty high average scores and stuff, but as soon as you move down even slightly in the rankings, you'll see that the averages are lower. And so I think sometimes, going to Europe is a nice option for an American who maybe has a couple of weaknesses in their file, but has a good head on their shoulders and a plan. And so in any event, this person, I think they're going to do well. They just need to retake the test, and hopefully that comes up strong.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on and talk about our second candidate. So this is Wiretaps candidate number 2. This person's targeting 5 schools, which include Columbia, HBS, MIT, Kellogg, and Wharton. So 5 of the M7. Intake year, they want to start in 2021. They've been working in human resources and what people are now calling people analytics. And they post-MBA they listed other, but they explained in the comments what they want to do, and it's relatively, they basically want to be a chief human resources officer eventually. Their GMAT score 760, GPA 3.68, 5 years of experience. This person's located in Seattle, but wants to land in the northeast of the U.S., and she indicates that she was an Ivy League, went to an Ivy League and was a math major, and initially worked in fintech, but then transitioned to people analytics about a year ago and really loves it. And she also said I mentioned female, white, LGBT as well. And she wanted to know, she actually asked us some very specific questions, which were, she said, wanted to know, what do we think of a people analytics candidate? Is that uncommon? Is it cliche? And then she also was a little worried about her GMAT because her verbal score is super high and her math is not. And to give you the specifics, I believe it was 61% on the 61st percentile on the math and the 99th percentile on the verbal. Obviously, the total score was 760, so maybe not too much to worry about. But in any event, she wondered, how's that going to play out? How will schools look at that? So, Alex, you had some back and forth with her, as did another one of our starred users on the site. But what do you make of this candidate?
Yeah, CHRO. Again, Graham, I will admit that I had to Google that acronym just to confirm. Well, I'm not even going to say to confirm what I thought it meant, just to understand what it means. So
did I get it right? Because I just guessed.
Yeah, no, you got it right. I didn't know if you Googled it too, but Chief Human Resource Officer, absolutely fantastic. But again, it's just that little warning to folks not to use acronyms that might, for some folks, and obviously me in this case, might not be as familiar with. That said, Graham, this is a fantastic candidate, period. Mm-hmm. Good execution on her applications, and she will have terrific opportunities. And I know that she wants to be in the Northeast, and she's selected 5 M7 programs that will absolutely give her opportunities in the Northeast, 4 out of those 5 being in the Northeast, plus Kellogg. But at the end of the day, Stanford will also provide her access to the Northeast, so I do encourage her to look at Stanford too. And, I'm not, I just think if I would put the question to this candidate: if Stanford admitted you, if you knew Stanford was going to admit you, would you turn down that opportunity? Not knowing whether Harvard will admit you, or Columbia, or MIT. So I definitely think this is a candidate that should be looking at Stanford also. I don't know where the weakness is. I mean, she's concerned a little bit about the quant score on the GMAT. But I mean, come on, Graham. She's got a 760 on the GMAT. She's got a 368, and she's a math major. I mean, how bad can her quant aptitude be? She works in data analytics. I mean, surely there's nothing for her to be concerned about.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that. I mean, again, as you may know, U.S. News and all these other rankings organizations, and even in the class profiles, no one ever publishes average percentile scores in a class, right? So it's always just about the average overall score, which in this case, 760 is like stellar, right? So I'm not worried. I think that the school will easily be convinced of her ability to thrive and survive the math stuff, right? I mean, she's, as you say, math major, 3.68. So I'm not worried about that at all. I do think that as someone who's kind of got this people analytics background of late for her most recent job and wants to stay in that domain and has kind of a nice lofty long-term goal of chief human resources officer, I think that it's not cliche, and it's not something they see that often, to be frank. I mean, I think it is increasingly popular. I would say, like, it's more present in the applicant pool than it was 20 years ago, but this is still kind of a new domain, and I'm not worried at all that she's going to be kind of labeled as like, oh, we've seen too many people like this, So I think, as you say, this person can kind of write her ticket to a top school. I guess the one thing that kind of caught me was she said that she kind of imagines, at least initially, doing this kind of work within the context of like a tech company, and she even said a startup. And that's where this idea of, okay, well, why isn't like Stanford or a school that's like has great proximity to a lot of tech startups on the list? So I hear you when you're saying to her, hey, why aren't you considering Stanford? I assume Kellogg's on the list because of their strengths in this domain in terms of, kind of HR and things. But yeah, she has a good list of schools. I mean, they're all top schools. But again, she's got the numbers and background to pull it off. She also mentioned she does a lot of work in her spare time around kind of supporting women.
Yeah.
So I think that's a strong theme that she can weave through her candidacy. LGBT as well. I mean, that's not everyone can tick that box either. So I think there's a lot to like here in terms of diversity and her background. And so not too much to say. I mean, I think this person's going to get into a very top school and have a great time.
and just to that point you just made, LGBT and ticking that box, just to, again, just to talk to the sort of broader audience a little bit. I mean, if you're a member of a community like this, or you are, gay or whatever the right term is, that fact isn't the necessarily the relevant fact. It's like, how has that impacted your life, your career? What struggles have you had to overcome necessarily to achieve the things? Obviously, this person's achieved some terrific things. So what struggles have you had to overcome? So thinking about it from that perspective. And then from another perspective, how have you engaged with that community? And how are you supporting that community based off of your successes? So because someone's, signs off on, that they're LGBT, that's fine, but it's the stories behind that that are going to differentiate a candidate more so. And for lots of candidates, there are a lot of stories behind that. Absolutely. This person in their notes or anything didn't really address any of that. But that doesn't mean to say that there aren't great stories behind that.
Sure.
I would also argue in this candidate's case, LGBT aside, that she just seems to be she checks every box, Graham. I've got to say it.
Yeah.
And like you say, there's no cliche here in terms of people analytics. Analytics across the board is obviously getting much more critical in lots of different roles, and people analytics happens to be, I reckon, probably one of the newer areas of analytics more broadly.
Yeah, agree. The last thing I would say is to your point about LGBT. I think some candidates are like, oh, I can't tick any of these boxes or whatever. But remember, I mean, schools are looking for diversity, but they don't define it in any kind of narrow way, right? So it could be ethnicity, it could be sexual orientation, it could be socioeconomic background, but it could also be you're an entrepreneur, or you were a varsity sports person and suffered a career-ending injury, or there's lots of ways to be different in the pool. So I wouldn't get hung up on it, but I think again, great candidate. I wish her the best of luck, and hopefully our advice has been useful and puts her at ease when it comes to worrying about the GMAT stuff or her career plan and stuff, because I think everything lines up well, and she's just gonna have to execute on these applications, which will take time, as we know.
Yeah, brilliant.
All right, so let's talk about Wiretaps candidate number 3. So this person is applying to 2 schools, or they have 2 on the list at the moment, in Cambridge and Oxford. They indicate that they want to start in the fall of 2021. They've been working in government operations, and post-MBA, they're hoping to get into nonprofit, social impact type work. GRE score is 321, GPA 3.2. They have 4 years of work experience, and they want to end up in DC. And the wrinkle here that we really need to flesh out as we talk about this candidate is they mentioned that for 4 years they've been working for the executive branch of the U.S. government in a series of unique positions, as they describe it. And they mentioned that I guess they've more recently been working at the Defense Department, helping to direct a multi-billion-dollar R&D portfolio with a focus on engagement with private capital firms. And they mentioned they don't want to attend a domestic MBA program, that they think international experience is really important, and that gaining some exposure from the UK programs would better serve their future career interests. And they have a kind of unique career plan, which we can get into, but they do want to return to the US after the MBA. So, Alex, what do you make of this candidate? Because I had a number of question marks when I kind of read through this and was thinking it over. And you had some dialogue and got some more info from them. But what do you make of this candidate?
Yeah, a few things stand out to me. Obviously, this candidate reckons that they have really interesting, unique experience, and that's going to carry their applications. And I'm not going to disagree with this candidate. Only this candidate truly knows how interesting their experiences are. So, fair play, that may well be correct. I just want this candidate to recognize that there are lots of high quality candidates with really interesting experiences, and not dismissing the 2 candidates we've already talked about today. So I think sometimes folks get so wrapped up in their particular experience is going to really carry them forward that they miss the mark then a little bit on looking at the overall application and so on and so forth. This candidate's GRE is a little, it's okay, 321, it's not outstanding. Their GPA is a little bit below average for top schools, so their numbers are a little bit on the lower side, so that might be a little bit of a problem. Okay, the biggest issue that with this candidate is their desire for a non-US based MBA program. And I recognize, again, that could be for very good reasons, and you want a non-US experience to sort of round out your own personal portfolio before you continue with your career. That makes perfect sense to me. But unlike the first candidate, who is quite committed to the fact that they might actually leave the US permanently, this person wants to come back to the US. And it says and I quote what they say in the notes. After the MBA, I want to return to the United States and start a program that connects the US government with private capital industry, helping leverage mutual goals and assets to benefit the defense sector and national interests, which sounds really good, very laudable goals. So the schools will like the fact that these goals are ambitious and maybe based on their current experiences might also be achievable. But I would suggest that unless this person is prepared to do all their own career networking whilst they're at a European school, and maybe they've already got the network in place through their current experiences, so it's a question of just going off to school, then coming back and starting this post-MBA career. This is going to be super challenging to figure all this stuff out when they're based in Europe if they haven't already got it in place now. So that's where my biggest concern with the candidate comes, Graham. The idea that they want the European or non-US MBA experience, but they want to work in the US when the MBA is complete. The other alternative would be to look at some of the US-based programs, some of the top programs, and look at exchange programs so that they could do a semester or two in Europe or whatever through that route. So that would be another thing that they could look at.
Yeah, so I think if we look at the pros and cons for this candidate, like obviously we'll take their word for it. The work experience seems really interesting. I mean, obviously, they have like 4 years working in government. You don't see a ton of people working. I mean, this person's been working in the executive branch and for the Defense Department. So,
right.
That's unique and interesting and potentially really valuable to their candidacy. They do also seem to have kind of some interesting goals, although I would argue that the goals need to be fleshed out. It's sort of unclear as to what they're doing and why what they're doing, what they want to do hasn't been done by someone else. So I think there's some ambiguity there. I couldn't agree more that I was trying to figure out how did they come up with this idea that they need to go get the MBA in the UK? How does that fit with their long-term plan? And, the schools on their list, Oxford and Cambridge, are both excellent. They're also 1-year format MBAs. And so I wonder, one of our commenters mentioned, what about LBS? And so I wonder, is this person looking to do a fast MBA as well? Like they don't want to do 2 years or so. Is that driving this decision as well? Of course, if that's the case, there are some short form MBAs on offer now in the US from several top schools. So so they need to kind of figure out like what's their career plan? How can they convey that in layman's terms to someone and have that admissions reader get excited about those goals and not feel like someone's already doing what they want to do? But then the other thing, and this is what really jumps out at me, are the numbers. I mean, they have a 321, which is pretty ho-hum for the top schools. I don't know off the top of my head what the average GRE score for Cambridge and Oxford is. They're probably within spitting distance there. But, you couple that with a 3.2 and it doesn't paint a great academic picture. And so I worry that it's that 1-2 punch. Obviously, if they had a 3.7 and a 3.21, they're applying to schools in Europe. As we talked about earlier, European schools often like to take Americans and, they're not as maybe test obsessed. Then you might have a storyline, but I'm just worried that it's sort of two strikes against in terms of the way the numbers interact. And I was just a little worried about this candidate, and they probably need to cast a wider net. I feel like, in their backyard in Washington, D.C. is Georgetown, which is a school that probably has a lot of experience looking at candidates from government, and is a good school, and could probably help them quite substantially in achieving their career goals. So
right.
I don't know. They need to have a bit of a rethink. That's my view. Again, nothing wrong with going over to Europe to do the MBA, but I'm just worried about how it all fits together in the case of this candidate.
Yeah, and I did neglect to mention that they have actually taken 3 additional master's level classes since undergrad and got A's in all 3, which is good, right? Again, that sort of shows a little bit of initiative on their part to sort of bolster that academic side. The GRE, again, 321, as you say, it's okay, but it's not going to help them stand out. And again, if you've got a lower GPA, again, they've done some coursework, but you've still got a lower GPA, The question to this candidate is 321 your limit?
Yeah.
If you can push that score up a few points, and if you think with additional prep or whatever it is, then it might well be worth exploring that option too. But I agree. I mean, Georgetown would be a very sort of, I would at least explore Georgetown just to sort of learn about more opportunities. You're based in DC. Well, you can't really visit them, I suppose, at this point, but you can network with them pretty aggressively. But there's also going to be some other, if you want to set your sights a little bit higher than Georgetown, that's fine too. There are some terrific, I think there would be some terrific opportunity for a candidate like this in US-based programs, which would give them better potential access to their post-MBA career. We've hammered home several times on these wiretapped episodes the ridiculously important role that geography does play in your school selection. The majority of students, and when they become alums, end up quite close by to the school that they attend in a lot of cases. So that's why and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this candidate on this particular podcast. The geography thing is a bit of an issue.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'll say is, you mentioned they took these 3 extra courses, master's level. I'd want to know what they were in and whether they were taken because the person's going to apply to business school and are very focused on, calc, stats, accounting, whatever these foundational courses might be to prepare you for business school, or whether they just happen to be classes they took in their spare time related to their job or something. So I'd want to know that the classes were taken, or at least are kind of MBA relevant classes, because getting an A in international relations or something at a master's level that doesn't necessarily show someone that you're ready for business school. So again, I think this person has pretty interesting. I mean, they've been a fly on the wall at the executive branch and the Defense Department. Like they've done some interesting things. There's certainly stories to tell. I've no doubt that they could put together a great application, but I'm worried about the numbers and the kind of as we say, the school selection. So something to think about. Yeah. Hopefully this helps them to think that through. Alex, those are the 3 that you've picked for this week. I did want to mention two things. One is that this is the 60th episode of Wiretaps that we've recorded. So we're now, another milestone has been reached, 60 episodes, which means we've probably, we've probably broken down 180 candidates' profiles or something at this point. So that's kind of cool. And a lot of good knowledge for people to kind of dive into as they try to...
Your maths is quite good, Graham.
Well, I don't know if we've always done 3.
60 times 3. I do think... I think you're quite... You must have an MBA from Wharton.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to say is just to remind people to sign up for the essay workshop we're doing. Again, couple of days from now, just go to bit.ly/essay insight, all one word, all lowercase. And it's Columbia, Duke, Wharton, and Yale who will have their admissions directors joining us for this discussion. Should be a lot of fun. So sign up for that. Other than that, I guess we'll see you next week. Alex, any final thoughts for our listeners this week?
Now, good luck, everyone. Stay safe. And I do encourage you to sign up for the event that Graham's hosting. It's unique. It's going to be very interesting.
All right. Thanks, Alex. We'll see you in a week.
All right. Take care.